It was amazing. I can't remember the last time I went to a party where that many people sat in one room talking to each other.
In college, people standing around a keg telling lies and stories. Hey, sir, that's some really good sling you're throwing out. Here's a card. Why don't you go to the elevator? You can go to the second floor. So you get to the fifth floor, and it's like 5 easy chairs, and you're debating, the origin of the universe.
Welcome to Bourbon and Rum, the podcast dedicated to civil conversation. I'm Kent. I like rum, and I'm from the left side of the aisle.
And I'm Kyle. I like bourbon. I tend to be a little more conservative. We're brothers talking politics over bourbon and rum.
Well, this is going to be kind of a special edition of the Bourbon and Rum podcast. We talked a little bit about it in our last episode, but I'll let you kind of introduce it. But I guess I would say kind of fulfilling or partially fulfilling a long-time dream of an experiment. And what I think we'll do is kind of talk through that, break that down a little bit, and let's dig into it.
So I've always been interested in a good conversation. We grew up, Kent, we grew up in a family that talks. I mean, it's a 4-hour talking session. I mean, that's what we do. We just sit around and talk. And I think one of the best examples of it was Grandma Jane. Our grandmother lived next door, and she had the most random assortment of friends. I mean, some of these people were really oddballs. I mean, she had one that was a chain smoker. She had these two other ladies that, that had been together a long time, really like nursing type people, nice folks. She had some lady who was fascinated with the Soviet Union at the time and hated the Pope. And, so she had all these interesting voices. And these people would come over to the house and they would sit there and talk for hours. And I was kind of interested in that. And then, we got older and got introduced to, in college, people standing around a keg telling lies and stories and the humor. I mean, you're laughing your head off and telling these crazy stories or, so all these experiences of conversation. And I started formulating this idea.
For most of his life, Kyle's been thinking about why some conversations feel like lightning in a bottle while others fall flat. And he wondered, could you set up a thing where if you got the conditions just right, you could sit down and have a wildly good, meaningful conversation?
Every room has a center, every center has a guard, every guard has permission, written soft but written hard.
Well, a couple of weeks ago, he decided to find out. Kyle brought 16 people to his house, took their phones away for an entire evening, and asked probing questions. The results were surprising, especially to the people involved. He's calling it the Sling Tower, and today we're going to hear all about it. From Bourbon and Rum, I'm Becca. Today's program, The Fifth Floor. Stay with us.
Every option pre-approved.
Let's start where it all began. Act 1, a bar in Memphis.
One of the places that it really came to be that I really started seeing what it could look like was I once lived, when I was single, I lived in Memphis, Tennessee. And I lived downtown about a block away from a little bar called Ernestine and Hazel's. And it's still there today if anybody knows Memphis. It's right across from the train station. But, there was like this bar area downstairs that was loud and boisterous. And then upstairs, there were a few different little rooms where people could go and hang out. Well, there was this one room on the corner, and it was kind of a rectangular corner bar. Seats about 5 or 6 people is all. And there's a bartender up there, and it's kind of quiet. You can hear the raucous crowd downstairs, but there's no music or anything upstairs. And it was a conversational bar. And you'd sit there and shoot the breeze with people. And it was so cool because you would get people from different walks of life. And, you're just talking. You're talking about all kinds of subject matter. And there were some really fascinating groups that got there. And I got to thinking about that. And I thought of this concept of kind of a way to stratify the good talkers from others. And I use this term sling all the time because I had a friend in college, his dad coined this phrase to talk about, kind of a nice way of saying slinging some BS. It's really just, I'm slinging it. I'm slinging stories, I'm slinging ideas, and then it becomes this whole thing about, there's good sling, there's great sling. You have all these different varieties. But I got to this idea that I called the Sling Tower. And the concept is you go in and there's a bunch of those little corner bars like at Ernestine and Hazel's, and you're talking and you're telling stories and sharing thoughts. And the bartender's like, hey, sir, that's some really good sling you're throwing out. Here's a card. Why don't you go to the elevator? You can go to the second floor. And then you're going to go to the second floor and it's another group and it's deeper conversation. And then you keep doing that until you get to the fifth floor and it's like 5 easy chairs and you're debating, the origin of the universe.
It's not by force, it's by design. It's not pressure, just alignment. You move ahead, but never outside. Every board already drawn, no alarms, no chains, just architecture and lanes. You don't obey, you operate inside a system you call fate.
So the other concept here, crazy neighbor has a friend named Devin, a great guy, and his mantra about conversation is always be interesting, be interested. And that was really the crux of the advice is good conversation is when somebody has something interesting to share, but they're also interested in others.
Every room has a center, every center has a guard. Every guard has permission, written soft but written hard.
So Kyle had this dream of setting up connections, but to make it work, he realized he couldn't just throw a party. He really had to engineer it carefully. So he created a system that moved people through the house based on how well they were talking. Act 2, the sling bracket.
So we did our first event last night, and I scheduled it about 6-8 weeks ago. We sent it to a bunch of our friends. We called it Founders Night because this is kind of trying this new concept. And we wound up getting 16 participants. And so we had 4 groups. And then I picked out a facilitator for each group. And then the other thing we did is we had some folks sitting around the hot tub outside. We had another facilitator with another group. I bought a keg and had people around a keg, and that was kind of a throwback to my keg vision of those days. And then we had another group, crazy neighbor who I've mentioned before, has a really cool little bar that he built out of his dining room. It's a really intimate kind of speakeasy environment. So we had another group over there. And then my wife actually took a group for each round in her car. And they went and drove to the dollar store and picked out silly stuff at the dollar store. And, the thought is you put people in different environments to have different conversations. I gave each of the groups, each of the facilitators, like some starter ideas, which some of them used, some of them didn't. And the concept is you get these people talking. And then at the end of the session, I then pull the facilitators in one by one, and we rated the participants. And, kind of like who is the most talkative, who is the least talkative type of a thing. And so then the second round, we grouped together kind of the people that were the most talkative in one group and the least talkative in the other. And we also segregated by gender. So we had 2 male groups and 2 female groups because we thought, hey, if people were, women, for instance, if the ladies are all together, that may produce a different conversation. And then the third round, what we tried to do is stack the deck evenly for each group. And then finally, and I equate these to floors. The 5th floor is we took 5 folks that we thought would make a good conversation.
By 10 p.m., the tournament was over, the winners had been chosen, and Kent stepped in to facilitate the final round, what they're calling the fifth floor. And right away they discovered something that flipped the script on what they thought they knew about good conversationalists. Act 3. The quietest, loud room.
I wasn't able to make the trip, so we did it via Zoom. I got to kind of share in the discussion. So I had a little bit of background going into this. But even then, I'm not matching up names or anything. I don't know what I'm getting. But you gave me 5 people, and we hopped on the Zoom to have the podcast. So I approached it with kind of a journal, kind of the Barbara Walters interview sort of thing of these 5 people. This is just an aside. At that same time, you guys were having tornadoes, and then this was the same night that of the White House Correspondents' Dinner with a shooter at this thing. And I don't know if you ever knew that, but I wasn't going to tell you. I didn't want to ruin the whole evening for you.
Everybody got their phones at the end of the night.
Every option pre-approved, every limit smoothly moved. You feel unique inside the frame, but every angle has a name.
Let me set the stage. We're 4 or 5 hours into this thing. These people have been through 3 rounds of deep intensity. They are the cream of the conversational crop, the elite. Let's go into the studio now with Jen, Matt, Lanny, Julie, and the other Jen. They're all friends of Kyle and Crystal.
Are you Kyle's brother?
I am, yeah.
Yes.
The older and wiser brother.
Are you shorter or taller?
I am shorter, fatter, older, and wiser. So, yeah, you got the whole story.
Kent is facilitating. And right away, he discovers something pretty interesting.
This has been really fun because this has been a dream of Kyle's for 30 years. Before we dig into it, what's this been like for you? It's kind of, I would imagine this is not a typical Saturday evening for you.
No.
Nope, not a typical Saturday. No.
I always say as an introvert, I was not looking forward to this. Kyle's invitation said, be interesting and interested. And I was like, I can 100% be interested. I cannot guarantee I'll be interesting.
Totally.
Because this many people and this sort of choreographed, maybe forced conversation, it makes me want to, but it was so natural and so organic and so well planned. And we got well in just out of the gate, just from a human connection perspective. This night totally surprised me.
Yeah.
I'll say.
So one of the interesting pieces for me is I've been sitting here at my house hanging out all evening, but between each of the rounds, the facilitators would meet with Kyle and kind of break down the round and how it happened. And so I've listened into that. So I haven't heard any of your conversations through the night, but I've heard these kind of responses of the facilitators. I think it's just profound, the relative nature of the introverted part of this group. I don't want to speak for Kyle, but I think he would say that in the initial vision of this, he kind of saw it as it seemed like the kind of thing that the big talker would dominate. And in fact, that was one of the concerns, right? That I mean, we've all been in groups where there's somebody who sucks up a lot of the oxygen, if you know what I mean. And yet it turns out that the listeners were the ones who really distinguished themselves. And that's, I mean, if this wasn't clear, that's why you've been invited to this group. You were all people whom the facilitators really flagged as really engaging in the conversation. And the listening, not just jumping in with opinions, I think maybe is a common thread here.
I think so. I think we all want to be heard, right? We all want to, whether good or bad, we want to tell our stories. And so people just want to be known and loved. And maybe that's by listening. I think it is in large part, and so listening is super valuable, and people don't do it enough.
I would by far think that I'm the least likely to be the most interesting person in the room.
Yeah, for sure. But I can listen all day. Yeah.
I think it's wanting to learn, right?
Yes.
I know that I'm only growing if I'm learning.
Yeah.
And I can't learn from my same bubble and circle on a continual basis.
Right. Yeah.
So the more you are forced to learn from other people, you can't learn unless you're listening.
Yes.
I was an extrovert as a young person. But then I started to understand, hold on, I think that was a cover of, hold on, I'm not that. I would rather be behind the
authentic self.
Absolutely.
Well, I was the one that took the people in the car. I don't know about you, but some of the funniest instances in my life happen in a car going from place A to place B. Whether there's not enough room or you're crawling over people, and it's just a forced intimacy, I think.
Let's step out of the studio for a minute. That's Crystal, Kyle's wife. She was one of the facilitators. She got to take her groups off-site for a trip to the dollar store. Crystal, was it easy to get the ball rolling in a car ride?
I do feel like, just from hearing from some of the other facilitators, my situation was a lot easier to, it was like more of a natural flow. People were just chit-chatting in the car, talking about TikTok dances, or it was just like hanging out in the car. And well, one, they didn't know where they were going, so that was good. What I did find it hard to do is Kyle gave us all a bunch of prompts and things. And at one point, one round, he wanted the conversations to get deeper. And just given it felt really unnatural to be driving to a dollar store and ask somebody, what's your biggest fear? It just didn't seem it didn't seem to fit. And even then, if I had gotten into a deep conversation, I would have welcomed that. But people in the car made a good comment, or a good point, that not being able to look at someone in the eye when you're having a deep conversation really minimizes your comfort level of, they're talking to the back of my head, So yeah, I don't know that we do the car again, but.
Although, if I could just throw in, I think the car is a really interesting dynamic, because sometimes that indirectness of you're both looking at the road, maybe this is more for the one-on-one conversation, but.
Yeah.
Okay, back into the studio.
As this outside observer role, which is kind of fun in this whole thing, to just kind of be the neutral party, kind of watching from afar. But listening to the facilitators talking, I mean, these were 3 rounds. Were they 45 minutes or an hour of conversation in each round? I think about that, right? Mm-hmm. And the facilitators would come back and talk about some of the things that were shared in the depth of the conversation. And I was like, oh my Lord, you're not all strangers to one another, but a very eclectic group. And it sounds like even in these brief vignettes, some pretty profound personal things were shared and some topics were discussed. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes to what you said. And I desperately want to communicate that to my kids, that those conversations can be had. We left our phones at the door, and I don't know you, I don't know you, I don't know you. But we had great conversations, and it is possible to look somebody in the eye and have those conversations and it be meaningful. And I hope that they, growing up in the age of technology, can see past that and value face to face.
Yeah.
People are cool and they have stories, and I want to hear them, So.
And it turns out we're all thirsty for human connection.
Yes. Yeah. Totally.
Starved for it.
We are, but also I want my kids to learn that. I really do.
The second group that we were in, for us, I guess it was for everybody, was gender specific.
Yeah.
And it was crazy for men, like, to hear the unified message that all men struggle with. And right, it all kind of had the same focus of the things that you're wrestling with. Like, am I good enough? Am I being a good enough dad and business and all of the things?
Yeah.
That was a cool part of this, though, was splitting up in the gender part too, because there's definitely creates a little bit of a different sharing.
Yeah.
When you break up, especially maybe way more for the guys, I would think, than
the
women.
Yeah,
but
you guys are not real comfortable.
I don't think our conversation was super deep, but I definitely probably shared something in that group that I probably wouldn't have done if it was in the other. If we'd have kept the same cadence of mix and stuff. So that was a cool part of mixing it up.
I wasn't in your group, so you became very vulnerable in your group, right? With something, I don't know what that was. You don't have to share that here, but does that have a influence on you being here? I would assume
on being up
in this room.
Maybe, I don't know. I made him sign things.
I did the same thing, right? Because I'm like, the cat's out of the bag.
I've done everything. I probably shared something that was a little bit more out there, but
so maybe like the vulnerability is key there, right?
Sure,
like everybody longs for that, right? Because it's relatable. It's relatable.
Assume, right? Generally, men struggle with that more than women. Like I got it all together,
And I'm definitely the type that has way less friends, although it may seem like I have a lot of friends, but there's only a couple in the circle of trust and in sharing feelings and things like that. But I'm also, I'm comfortable sitting in a room talking with all women, as weird as that sounds, as well as sitting in a room talking about guy stuff with a bunch of guys. And I think that's just a lot from how I grew up, moving a lot, and kind of adaptability and weird things like that. But so it was a cool, again, that was a cool part of breaking out in a group of just splitting up, sharing something.
I think it says a lot about you as a listener. You can listen to anybody, men, women, anybody.
And it's weird. The older you get too, obviously everybody has more experiences, and you meet more people that have had more experiences. And in some respects, I don't know if that they get more interesting, and you're like, that's a great story that I could learn from that. But the older you get, just the more people you run into have different stories.
Like, I have girlfriends that are in my life that I met when I was 10, and I have probably 5 or 6 just ride or dies. One of them's here tonight. Like, I have the best friends in the history of the world. They are the loves of my life. But you become, too, over time, like you want to connect with others, but I'm also not going to connect with 75 people because I don't invest. Like, these are my people. Like, you become selective.
An intimate bond with.
Yeah.
But what allows you to get to that reflective state? Because I would be curious if this same thing occurred with a group of 20-year-olds, with a group of 30-year-olds, with a group of 40-year-olds, right? We're not all the same age, but we're on the same cohort as a general statement. So I think the fact that we become selective is because we've taken the time to reflect.
Yeah.
So true.
One of the things that he's always set as the objective of this is good sling, good conversation. But as this process has unfolded and he's narrowed down and built this process, one of the really challenging things is, what does good sling mean? What does good conversation mean? And I mean, I'm hearing a little of that with you right now, but in some ways that's kind of the essence of the question, right? What makes good conversation?
Connection makes good conversation.
Ooh, that's good.
I mean, I think even early on in one of our first groups, the first question, we're just humans living a very similar experience, and everyone has their stories. Everyone has a story. Everyone's slaying dragons and affects you differently, but we have like a human experience together. And I think even early in our sort of sessions, we had some connective tissue.
I think it helped too, knowing Kyle and knowing his genuineness.
Yeah.
And uniquely, though, I don't since I don't know them as well, there's some transfer of that from Louis.
Yeah.
But just the way he wrote everything out, and I was like, he's committed to this.
Yes,
He's
totally.
passionate about it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, anybody who's that passionate about trying to make something work, it's worth buying into.
Yes. Yes.
It's so funny you brought it.
Yes.
I'm not a details person. My wife was asking me what we were going to do last night in bed. And I was like, I don't know. You know more about this than I. But I was the one that accepted the deal. Yeah. So she's going through this like at 11:30. I'm like, groggy. And she's like, I don't know if we're ready for this. I'm like, it's Kyle.
It's going to be fine.
Okay. Yeah.
I didn't get the head count, but when you all self-identified as introverts, what proportion of the 5 of you?
I think all 5.
I would say
I'm probably borderline.
But definitely borderline.
Yeah,
the older I've gotten, and you do more tests, it's right. There's a
more
introverted feels my fuel tank.
Yeah.
And then I go.
Yeah.
I put myself in that category, but I think that the most operative definition there is, does it burn or give you energy, right? I can function very extroverted when I need to, but it's at a cost of energy. And some people just thrive on that. In the groups that you were in, was it obvious who was more of an introverted bent versus an extrovert? And how did that play out in your groups?
I think it was obvious in some circumstances.
Yeah.
Who was more comfortable speaking up and who isn't. Also, that Kyle had made plans for facilitators helps to move things along when perhaps someone is taking too much time or someone is not speaking up, and making sure that they get engaged in the conversation. So I think having really intentional facilitators helped to sort of bridge the gap.
The way the conversation was facilitated, it was like, okay, all right, here we go.
You can participate.
But I wouldn't inherently be forthright.
Yes.
I guess if there wasn't some fuel there first. So it was done well.
I get fuel by observing. So I don't know if y'all know what Strength Finders is, but one of mine, kind of the individualization and the relator, kind of top 5. Both of those, like, I get energy just kind of listening and trying to connect and see what makes people tick. I think sometimes I can come across as introverted and I feel introverted, but just because I'm soaking things in and just kind of observing, and then once kind of that make that connection, then it kind of starts to open up. So in a shorter time span with a smaller group, it's hard for me sometimes to immediately open up, but I think it's over time I've kind of gotten used to it. But again, it was a safer group. There was the connection with Kyle, so it was kind of like a little bit safer to without having figured everything out.
I've heard a couple of things just mentioned here, but one thing that really struck me was one of the facilitators came back I think after the second round and said, 5 different people have said some version of, my kids need this or need to do something like this. And I'm thinking, so a couple questions for you. First of all, there is I'm not putting ages on anybody, but there is somewhat of a generational homogeneity here, right? You're within brackets of each other. What would this look like if this was an average age 20 years younger? And how much does your history and experience, how does that color this experience? And does that sentiment resonate that our kids need this kind of interaction?
Yes and yes.
I would have been incapable of any of this at 25.
Yeah. I think about it like my kids are 20, 18, and 14. And so I'm like,
bless you.
But like, I didn't have any of this when I said to one of the groups outside, I can't call my mom and be like, how did you navigate social media or the phones or whatever? Because we didn't have that. And so we're navigating it like first, right?
Yeah.
And so like, I don't know what I'm doing and I'm trying to do my best and like, I'm hoping that it just like, I don't know. There's grace there. I say that a lot. So I don't know. It's a lot. It's a lot to parent. I feel like being the first generation phone mom.
If you'd asked me that question 2 years ago before our oldest son went to college, I would have 100% said he needs this. He's not going to survive. He needs something like this right now. He's going to get eaten alive. And something happened when he went to college. And I am sure there was something we did, but grace of God, whatever, all the prayer, all that kind of stuff. But all of a sudden he spreads his wings on his own.
Yeah.
And then of course the daughter, she's a girl, so she's naturally more talkative and stuff. And I'm like, but oh my gosh, she's going into a big world with a bunch of mean girls, and she's been in a bubble, and she's going to the big liberal college, and there's a bunch of rich kids there, and all these things. And lo and behold, they I don't know, those two don't need it. I think the 15-year-old that's middle of puberty needs this right now, but at least there's hope for him.
Kyle said he explicitly kind of roped politics off of this, and I'm going to venture into territory here. Stick with me for just a moment. So the podcast that Kyle and I host, we started this because of our mutual frustration. We are about as opposite politically as you can be. But we started the podcast because of our mutual frustration with the fact that both of us lives in a world where our friend groups tend to get kind of clustered in things, and we feel like we are not, as a nation, doing a great job of talking across things. So I'm going to ask this question without, I don't want to get into politics per se, but I wonder your perceptions about the nature of dialogue in our country, which is kind of what we're trying to address with the podcast. And by extension, I think what Kyle's interested with this, the belief, I think his fundamental belief that if we just talk to each other rather than shouting over each other, we could get a lot more done. I wonder if you could react to that concept, and how does that resonate with you?
I think one of the things you've heard from each of us is that perhaps we were bigger listeners in our sessions than maybe speakers, right? And so from a political perspective, we talk all over each other all day long. And the people with the strongest opinions do the most talking. And it's usually not representative of most of us, right? It's one thing to an extreme or another thing to an extreme. It's not helpful. Most of us reside, and regardless of what you think or which issue is your biggest issue, if you just listen to another human, that's our baseline. And listening rather than preparing what you're about to say without listening because you already know what you're going to say, and actually hearing someone and what their lived experience is, which is different than yours, is valuable. And if we could just stop for just a second from all of the bullshit, frankly, that gets said. Is that allowed on the podcast?
Yeah, we've only got one word that we've kind of completely avoided, but bullshit is not that word, so bring it on.
But listening to someone, they have a story, they have a life, and it's influenced how they feel. And it doesn't mean right or wrong. It means that's their lived experience.
Even if it's completely opposite of what you believe.
Completely.
Just give them a minute. Give them a minute to explain. And who knows what their background is, where they came from, to bring them to where they are.
I don't want to cut it off, but as we kind of sort of circle the bringing this home, I wonder if you could individually, and then maybe some more dialogue too. I guess the question is, did you find this interesting and useful? I've heard from you that I think you all would agree that this kind of dialogue with people is valuable. But maybe what are things about this experience that can we distill some things that might serve as advice to others in engaging in dialogue, or if we wanted to, for round 2 when Kyle has it a couple of months from now and invites you all back. I mean, what are things that what are things that emerge to you as the conditions under which fruitful dialogue flourishes?
A safe environment.
Tell more about that, please. What do you mean by that?
I think the fact that we at least all have the same connection of Kyle, right? So there's a trust there.
Yeah.
And that there were guidelines, right? So it's safe because we know, okay, this is not going to be about politics. This is not going to be, an extreme situation. So I think having those guidelines is huge with a basic starting point of a safe environment. A safe environment means probably to a little bit of a controlled environment.
I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but I'm hearing you say that the participants came with a certain expectation of willingness to engage in that.
Safety for me.
There were definitely guidelines.
If you read it.
I read them all. I did. Okay, wait. Hold. As an introvert, did you read all the things?
I did.
I read every bit of it.
I had no idea what.
Oh, I read it all. I'm detailed, and so I was like, everything you can give me to be prepared for what I'm going into, I will read.
I think one of the things that's helpful in this situation is getting comfortable with discomfort. And I think one of the things too that would make this even more meaningful is if there weren't so many like-minded people in the room. And so we are, for the most part, as people who love Crystal and Kyle, we might have similar beliefs, and there are a few maybe who would politically be a little more aligned with you, sir. And so for that,
buttering you up.
but I think what would be interesting to see if we could be uncomfortable with people who weren't maybe quite as like-minded.
I think session 2. I think session 2. That's what I was really thinking.
Yeah, there you go.
That was other question. Love for the next, not the same night, but the next time he does this, or after the first session, like the next round would be
the question.
A lot more diversity.
Yeah, totally.
I would assume, right? If you built it on such framework as we're talking about, you would find a connection and then realize, like, okay, we're really close on certain things.
Yeah.
We are light years apart on that. And like, that's not that quite big of a deal.
If I could say something about my kids real quick and kind of, I made the comment about liberal schools. So we go to a little academy in our little town. And although a lot of the teachers are conservative, the curriculum's not conservative. And it's a very diverse school because a lot of people come from other parts of the country there and such. And because it's not a true ISD in the Metroplex, there was a lot of conversations that happened in their classes that kind of caused us to be like, oh gosh, okay, we're going to talk about that. But at the end of the day, it created in them, it helped them in their success when they went to college. I'll say that. Where they're able to have conversations with people in college that came from East Coast, West Coast, and all these different socioeconomic and beliefs and religion and things like that. And it's taken me till I've got a lot older to, kind of be able to have some of those conversations instead of just kind of being quiet and saying, there's nothing to share. So
why do you think, why is there such a fear of having a conversation about things that you maybe aren't familiar with? Because it's going to somehow infiltrate the way that you believe?
I think for me, it was the way I grew up, and my parents and their super conservative nature. And although Amanda's parents were super conservative in religious and drinking and all those kind of Bible Belt ways, they had open conversation about stuff that tensed me up.
We can't talk about it.
We can't talk about that time of the month. Like, what is that? Kind of thing. And go talk to your son right now. I'm like, well, I can't do it. So little things like that, but also in the bigger kind of, conversations that we didn't have growing up. So I think that's even though there was a little bit, she was raised a little different, and it was Bible Belt, but I think it was, at least for me, it was kind of the way I was raised in the Bible Belt that made some of those conversations harder.
I was taught to be afraid of those, I don't think intentionally, but almost afraid of those things like, science is bad. You know what I mean?
Maybe not even almost associate or hey, let's not be super duper friends with those people.
Yeah, because they might confuse you somehow. Yeah. And I remember having a really good friend that was Mormon, very different set of beliefs. He was a great guy.
It's not by force, it's by design. It's not pressure, just alignment. You move ahead, but never.
The night was a success. The experiment worked. People were really connecting. But then, the real world came knocking. Act 4.
5 minutes later.
Kyle, listening to this now, did it go the way you envisioned it?
I think when I first had this vision of what this was going to look like, it was very much like an American Idol competitive thing. Like you're picking out the best BSers in the crowd, the best stories, and it's going to be these amazing, boisterous laughter stories. 2, I got to thinking about, I get 16 people come to my house. If it's a competition thing and you go to the second floor, it's like, okay, all you losers, you go hang out and then the conversation is going to continue over here. No, I think the competition angle, I think what I'm after in the Sling Tower overall is really just about producing good conversation. Not necessarily like the best knock out of the park stories, but just the best conversation. And it's kind of like when you're picking for this selection, you're really trying to pick an ensemble. You're trying to pick a group that is going to go well with each other and create energy and good conversation. It was, I think it went really well. Everybody had fun.
It was amazing. I can't remember the last time I went to a party where that many people sat in one room talking to each other.
I mean, it's funny because we were digging into that whole competitive thing, but multiple people were like, it was so much fun. We had such a good time and such good conversations. Probably 4 or 5 people said, I just made a new friend. Literally. I mean, people that didn't know each other are friends. One of the facilitators said he heard from 4 or 5 people. I want to do something like this with my kids. I want my kids to do this, not have a phone, actually have to have a conversation with somebody. That was a big theme.
Crystal, you were watching this from the inside. What do you think was the secret to the success?
I think one of the hugest things, he had everybody's phone. He took everybody's phone at the beginning and set it aside. And I swear it was probably 15 to 20 people sitting in a circle in a living room, all staring at each other, all having the same conversation with each other. Now, we had some rough storms last night, so we had like sirens going off and stuff. So at that point, everybody's got kids at home, so we brought everybody's phones back. Within 5 minutes, factions had broken off. Like everybody had dispersed, like broken up. I don't think the event would have happened or worked nearly as well had phones not been withdrawn from the situation.
I have to ask, did anyone ever dip their toes into politics? Did it ever go that way?
I did poke a little bit, and I thought this was interesting. You, in terms of setting the conditions that made people comfortable, one of the things that you had said was you explicitly took politics off the table.
Yeah.
And every one of them mentioned that like that was a safe space that, and you mentioned that this is not directly related to our podcast. Gosh, I think it is. I think it's way more related even than you think. The fact that they all named the idea of political discussion as being something that would have been toxic to what they were doing, I thought was really interesting. But I dug in a little bit on that. They self-identified. So I guess some of them were listeners of the podcast. Some of them weren't. I've met some of them. Most of them never met. I think in the introduction I said, well, we do this podcast. You're conservative. I'm liberal. And even at some point people were like, well, yeah, we're probably all more like Kyle than like you. And I think this is really interesting. It became evident as we talked, look, these are a group of your friends. So they range, obviously, but they're some old friends, there's some friends of your kids, there's some friends of yours from different chapters of life. But I thought, even as we were talking, as they were talking, I'm trying to think. I'm treading on interesting ground here. I was struck by, I don't know that if we'd had a party with, first of all, if we'd had a party with 16 of our friends, we'd have had to hand out $100 bills to get people here, to get that many people here. We don't have the social circle that you do. But it was obvious to me, even in this really fruitful conversation that this group of people were having, that this was a different culture than what I operate in. It was really palpable. And I think there's obviously a range of where people are politically and socioeconomically, but there's not as much of a range there. And I wonder what influence that had. I think they themselves inadvertently said, well, we all know Kyle and Crystal. We've got, there was a sort of a subgrouping that already happened there.
Kyle, looking back on the whole night, what's the thing you're still thinking about?
I was just thrilled that some of the people that came into this thinking either I'm not good at this or this is beyond my comfort zone, wound up having a great time. And the people that wound up on your podcast, there was several of those people. And one of the participants said, she said at one time she did a poll and everybody that we selected for the podcast identified as an introvert. And so, back to that, where my head was on this, you raise people to the fifth floor, you're going to get all these extroverted slingers. And we didn't do this on purpose. And we put together a way of trying to figure out who's the most interested and interesting. And we got to a group of introverts, which is a whole fascinating thing. But I think those people specifically had come up to me and they were so, I think they were genuinely excited about participating in it. And I just thought that, to me, was the most dramatic benefit of this, is that people that didn't think this was for them, actually it turned out to be, no, this is precisely for you.
Every board already drawn, no alarms, no chains, just architecture and lanes. You don't obey, you operate inside a system you call fate.
You can build a tower and you can set the rules. You can even bring in the perfect set of people, really stack the deck. But the second you hand back the screens, the tower falls. Within 5 minutes, they weren't a group anymore. They weren't a connected ensemble of explorers. They were just 20 people in a room together, alone. But for an evening, while a crazy guy took a run at the POTUS, and there were tornadoes all around, they had some of the most genuine conversations they've ever had.
You step in line and call it freedom. Every boundary pre-aligned.
The fifth floor was produced by Bourbon and Rum. Special thanks to our facilitators and everyone who trusted Kyle enough to hand over their phones and climb the Sling Tower. And to a certain bar in Memphis that gave us the blueprint. I'm Becca. We'll be back next week, resuming our regular programming and getting back into the world of politics. Thanks for listening.